Okay, so just imagine an AI so powerful that it could write like a full novel, compose a symphony, or even solve those complex equations that, take scientists years to figure out.
Yeah.
Well, that's the kind of challenge that Google's facing right now. And to power this insane amount of AI, they're turning to, well, kind of controversial solution, nuclear power. But is this like a stroke of genius or is this a risky gamble? That's what we're going to be diving into today. So we've got this super interesting article from Popular Science to unpack today. It's called Google Bets Big on Mini Nuclear Reactors to Feed Its AI Demands. And it was just published, I think it was October 15th, 2024.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating to me about this whole thing is it's like this convergence of these two huge trends, right? Like the explosion of what AI can do, and then also this desperate need for energy that's both clean and reliable.
Totally. And how do we even begin to grasp the sheer amount of energy these AI systems need? It's got to be massive, right?
Yeah. Well, as AI models get more and more complex, like we're talking Google's Gemini here, training them and then actually running them takes a crazy amount of computing power. And of course, that directly translates into just a ton of energy consumption.
So how much are we actually talking? Give me a sense of scale.
Well, some reports are saying that by 2030, just 8 years from now, data centers, the ones housing these AI models, they could be using more than 9% of the total energy in the U.S. Think about that for a second. It's like powering a small country just for AI.
Wow, that's a crazy amount. So it makes sense why Google's, looking at other ways to get energy. And like the article says, their solution is they're going small, but they're going nuclear. They're using these things called mini reactors or SMRs.
Yeah, they've actually teamed up with this company, Kairos Power. They're a startup, and they're the ones developing these SMRs. And Google's plan is to commission 6 or 7 of them. Their goal is to add a pretty significant amount of clean energy to the grid, something like 500 megawatts by 2035.
So help me understand this. What exactly are these SMRs? And how are they different from those giant cooling towers that we usually picture when we think of nuclear power plants?
Okay, well, imagine SMRs kind of like prefabricated building blocks for clean energy. They're way smaller than traditional reactors, and the cool thing is they can be built in factories and they ship to wherever they're needed. This modular design makes them super flexible and also potentially safer.
Okay, so that's interesting. But I think a lot of people, myself included, we get kind of nervous when we hear the word nuclear, even if they're calling them mini. How do these SMR, how do they address those safety concerns?
Well, one big thing is that the reactor core itself is smaller, and it operates at a lower power output, so that reduces the risk of a major meltdown.
So even if, the worst case scenario happened, it wouldn't be as bad.
Exactly. Plus, they have fewer components overall, which means there are fewer things that could potentially go wrong.
Right, that makes sense. Anything else that makes these SMRs different from the traditional nuclear plants?
Oh, absolutely. This is where it gets really cool. Instead of water, the Kairos Power SMRs use molten salt for cooling.
Molten salt? Whoa, that sounds like straight out of a sci-fi movie. How does that even work?
It's pretty innovative, yeah. So molten salt can handle much higher temperatures than water, and that makes the whole reactor more efficient. It also gets rid of the risk of steam explosions, which is a big concern with the conventional reactors.
So wait, these SMRs are not only smaller and potentially safer, but they're also more efficient. That's starting to sound pretty good, especially when you think about how much energy Google needs.
And there's another big plus, especially for a company like Google, refueling. Traditional plants need to be refueled every year or two, which means they have to shut down, and that can interrupt the power supply. But SMRs, they can run for 3 to 7 years without needing to be refueled.
Whoa, that's a huge difference. For Google, they need that computing power running all the time for their AI stuff. So having a reliable source of energy is super important.
Exactly. It's like, imagine a marathon runner who never has to stop for water. They could just keep going and going.
So it seems like for Google, this nuclear option makes a lot of sense. But I'm sure some people aren't happy about this, right?
Oh, of course. There are always going to be concerns when it comes to nuclear power. Even if it's smaller and they say it's safer, people are still going to have questions.
What are some of the things people are worried about?
Well, even with these smaller reactors, what do you do with the nuclear waste? That's still a problem. And of course, there's always that worry about security and what if there's an accident, even though they say it's unlikely.
Yeah, and I bet it costs a fortune to build these things, right? Even if they are smaller, it can't be cheap.
You're absolutely right. And that's what some critics are saying. They say these SMRs might not be worth it compared to other clean energy sources. especially when you think about the long-term costs of running them and dealing with the waste.
So it's a big risk for Google, and it might not even work out.
Yeah, it's not like a guaranteed solution. And it seems like Google knows that because they're not just betting on nuclear. The article mentions that they're putting a lot of money into other clean energy technologies too.
Right. They're not putting all their eggs in one basket. They're investing in solar and wind power and even geothermal.
It's a smart move, spreading their investments like that. They're giving themselves more chances to succeed, and it also means they'll have a more stable and sustainable energy plan for the future.
Okay, so tell me more about these other options. What's Google doing with solar and wind right now?
They've been investing heavily in solar and wind farms for a while now. Those are the most developed renewable energy sources, and they're already powering a lot of Google's data centers.
And it sounds like they're also looking into some newer clean energy technologies like geothermal, right?
Yeah, geothermal is pretty cool. It's basically using the heat from inside the earth to create electricity.
Yeah.
And it has the potential to be a really reliable source of clean energy.
It's like harnessing the power of a volcano, but safely. I think it's great that Google's trying all these different things. It shows that they're serious about finding ways to power our technology without just relying on fossil fuels.
I totally agree. It proves that there's no one perfect solution to our energy problems. We need to use a combination of different technologies, and each one will have its own strengths and weaknesses.
Speaking of weaknesses, the article did say that SMRs still cost a ton of money up front, even though they're smaller.
Yeah, and there are also concerns about whether they can really be scaled up. Some experts are saying that even with a modular design, it might be hard to build enough SMRs to meet the growing demand for clean energy.
So SMRs are promising, but there's still work to do before they're widely used.
That's why these conversations are so important. We need to look closely at these new technologies, understand the good and the bad, and think about what it all means for the future of energy.
And that's exactly what we do here on the Deep Dive, right? We give our listeners the information they need so they can form their own opinions and make smart decisions.
Because knowledge is power, and when you have power, you have to use it responsibly, especially when we're talking about things as powerful as AI and nuclear energy.
You said it. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Google's nuclear-powered AI plans, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners, something for them to think about?
Sure. Imagine a future where AI is everywhere, helping us do amazing things and solve big problems. It's a future full of possibilities, but it also raises a big question. In this AI-powered world, how do we make sure everyone has enough energy and that it's clean and sustainable?
That's the question, all right? And there's no easy answer.
Exactly. So as you go about your day, think about this. Will nuclear power be part of the solution, or will it turn out to be a bad idea? It's something we need to talk about.
I agree. There's a lot to unpack here. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive.
It's been fascinating exploring how these two powerful forces, AI and energy, are shaping our world.
We talked about how much energy those AI models need, especially Google's Gemini.
Yeah, it's really mind-boggling.
And then we got into Google's kind of surprising decision to invest in those, what were they called again?
SMRs.
Right, SMRs, those small modular reactors. They think it might be the answer to their clean energy needs, at least partly.
Yeah, it's definitely a bold move.
We even talked about some of the other things they're doing, like solar and wind power and even geothermal.
You're really exploring all the options.
And I think it just goes to show how complicated this whole issue is. There's the technology, of course, but then there's also the economics of it all and the impact on the environment.
Absolutely. It's not a simple problem.
But that's why we do these deep dives, right? We try to give you all the pieces of the puzzle so you can see the bigger picture, so you can understand what's at stake as we figure out the future of AI and energy.
It's not about telling you what to think. It's about giving you the tools to think for yourself.
Exactly. We want you to leave here with a better understanding of the choices we have and what those choices could mean down the road.
The future of energy and technology is something we're all going to shape together.
So as we wrap things up today, just remember, keep learning, keep asking questions, keep diving deep into the things that matter to you.
It's your curiosity and your involvement that will drive progress. That's how we'll make a difference.
That's what the deep dive is all about. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay curious as